You're listening to Boobies and Newbies. Find and follow Boobies and Newbies at Boobies Podcast across platforms and on boobiesandnewbies.com. And don't forget at Real Kelly Ray on TikTok, because TikTok thinks I'm making porn if I use boobies in the handle. Thanks, TikTok! Happy holidays, everybody, and welcome to a special holiday edition of Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. The episode you're about to listen to was previously recorded in January 2023 as part of our Tit Talk series on YouTube. Now, if you're new to Boobies and Newbies, Tit Talk is a monthly panel discussion between the folks who write romance and the readers who love them. Join me every month as I moderate a discussion with a new topic each time amongst readers, bloggers, podcasters, authors, and more, all in the name of romance. For this episode, we're discussing an age-old question that continues to consistently plague the minds of readers today. Can you separate the art from the artist? We'll let you decide. Authors behaving badly is nothing new. If you follow Boobies and Newbies on Instagram or TikTok, you know it's true because I post enough about it. So why is it that time and time again, these problematic, bigoted, and often insert your favorite ist word here, authors, continue selling books? More importantly, who's reading them? Listen in as my panelists and I discuss the concept of separating the art from the artist, offer our own insight into the dangers of supporting problematic artists, and pitch a few alternative solutions that will hopefully help you sleep better at night. As always, you can revisit our past Tit Talk episodes on the Boobies and Newbies YouTube channel if you prefer the visual format. The best way to support the podcast is to follow us across our socials at Boobies Podcast. And of course, if you've got a few extra bucks to spare and you want to go the extra mile towards supporting your favorite podcast, you might consider subscribing to the Boobies and Newbies Patreon. I will, of course, leave links for all of the above in today's show notes, but for now, please sit back and enjoy the show. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I see a few people joining us. Feel free to, drop where you're joining us from in the comments. Say hello. But my name is Kelly. I'm the host of Boobies and Newbies. It's a romance novel review podcast where I discuss romance with newbie romance readers and then some. And one of the things we launched last year during our 6th season of the podcast is Tit Talk. And that is what we are all here for today, is a roundtable virtually discussion of a topic in and around the world of romance books, which we all love. So I'm here with these 3 fabulous guests, and I'll allow each of them to introduce themselves. So I'm going to kick it over to Shannon first.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Shannon Elliot, or at least that's my pen name. And I am an author of Why Choose Queer Romance. So my book is in the back, but thanks everybody for joining.
Anybody can go next. Sorry. Okay. Sonia, Georgina, whoever.
Okay, I'll go next.
Okay.
I'm Sonia.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Sonia with Reading with Sonia on TikTok and on Instagram. I'm basically known for rants and memes.
Love that.
Hi, I'm Georgina. I'm a Black LGBTQ plus author. I write diverse romance and erotica, and that's probably it.
Wonderful. Yeah. So it's really important to me when we do these discussions to have kind of like a wide range of folks who are doing various things in and around the world of romance. So we have writers, we have bloggers. I know all of us are on TikTok, which, just seems to be the place these days to share our rants and raves, which is wonderful. But today we are here to talk about something that I think has kind of rampantly hit the world of romance, not just romance, but books in general. and that is the concept of separating the art from the artist. Is it possible? Can you do it? And of course, I definitely want to hear from people in the chat as we discuss this and where, they weigh in on it. So I guess just in general, if anybody is up for the task of kind of clarifying the concept of separating the art from the artist, feel free to jump in and say what that might mean to you.
Oh, what a task. Goodness gracious. Okay, I'm going to give my best shot. My best understanding of the argument of separating the artist from their art is, on one hand, people say that you should be able to separate an artist and their actions and their values from the work that they create, because what I enjoy is separate from who they are. On the other hand, which is probably the side that I lean towards, is this idea that a creator and their art aren't interchangeable. They are one being, and it is impossible to create art without putting a little bit of yourself in it. And so you can't separate an artist from their actions, their morals, the things that they say, and the communities that they harm or uplift, because otherwise you're separating like who this person is from what they're trying to share with the world.
Lovely, concise, fantastic. Anybody, Georgina or Sonia, want to add anything to Shannon's perception of the concept?
Actually, she's got it completely correct. And it's something I had to struggle with, because if you don't know, I was a huge Harry Potter fan. I've been in that fandom for 20 plus years. And that was something so hard. I had to sort of, because every Harry Potter fan had that moment where they're like, it's all baked into the book. It's like in the foundation of the world of this book and how it's made and the characters. And you had to sort of make a hard choice, right? I mean, and for me, I've so many great friends I've made in that fandom, so many great works I still think about even to this day. And it's so hard to say goodbye, but sometimes you have to say goodbye. I mean, to grow and to be better.
Yeah.
100%, absolutely. And so when you told me what the subject was for this live, I posted a questionnaire of what it meant for a lot of people. So I'm going to open up my DMs right here, and I'm going to kind of read a few.
So hoping that you were going to bring this up. I meant to message you and be like, I want to know the results of whatever poll you were taking, Sonia, because I actually did do a small poll myself. So I do want to hear what your followers had to say.
I wanted to see where everyone kind of did it match my values? Did it match my views? And kind of see, hi nerdy, and see how just the community thinks itself, because I have a lot of followers that probably don't align with my thought process, which is completely okay. I'm open and honest, and as long as we don't get in a fight in DMs, I'm completely fine. But I think a lot of people said is, if it's not a situation that I feel like it hurts a community, if it's not blatant. A lot of people are like, if they're not blatantly racist, if they're not blatantly phobic of a certain community, I can separate them from that. But when it becomes to a point where they hurt in a community that they are serving, that's where I draw the line. And that was a lot of my DMs from that. There was some people that said that if I wasn't directly hurt, then I'm still able to read it. A lot of people brought up Harry Potter. They're saying I still enjoy it. It was a big part of my life. I can't let that go, but I think that's a very personal thing for people. But ultimately, I think out of how many 75 responses, everybody really just said that as long as you're not hurting a community that you are serving, because as an author, you are serving a community. And when your values and when your views kind of separate them and not include them in what you are writing, then you are cutting off an entire community. Hi, Cookie. From enjoying your work. So basically that's kind of how I went there, and I'm pretty proud of the people who follow me.
No, that's really interesting. Oh, go ahead, Shannon.
Well, okay, you said something that like I've had to think a lot about in the past, I guess 6 or so months. You mentioned that if it's not blatantly harming a community, and that's the one part that personally I tend to push back on when we have this
Yeah.
kind of conversation. There was, and I'm not big on naming names because everybody gets to come to their own decision when it comes to who they read. But there was an author earlier this year who is very large in the romance community, very large in the spicy community, who posted a TikTok that was subtly transphobic. And when I started evaluating a lot of her work and the things that I had read and what my friends were saying about their work, it was also not blatantly transphobic. However, there was a lot of gender essentialism. There was a lot of language that made me uncomfortable as a queer person. And so I made the personal decision to stop reading that author, and I didn't want to support that author. And again, I've never named them in content. I may have hinted at them, but
I have.
I saw that video from both of you, Georgina and Kelly. And like, it was just one of those things where it's like, I feel like when we start to delve into the semantics of, is it blatant homophobia, racism, bigotry versus is it like subtle and still harmful? I tend to lean on the side of, well, no matter what, it is harming a community because it's putting these ideals out into the world that says this is okay and normalizes it to the extent that people don't even recognize it as being like transphobic, racist, whatever the ism is.
It's microaggressions.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, it really
it's all in the context, right?
Yeah.
Because I do literary analysis for shit and giggles. I like to take things apart. When the first time I'm reading a book, I don't always get everything. It's just sort of like I just take it in, and then I have to go read it again and start just taking it apart, like you would take apart an engine. But it's always like it's insidious. It just like seeps in the cracks, and you may not catch it immediately, but when you go back, it's there. And how do you deal with that? Like, how do you deal with that? It's like a betrayal almost, isn't it? Like something that you thought it was good, and then you look at the mechanisms of how it's made, and you realize, oh, this was always a harmful thing. And I don't know how to, deal with the betrayal even now, and how to process it and move past it.
There's all three of you brought up some like really great points that I'm like, ooh, like trying to pin them in my head to like come back to. But I do think a lot of this discussion kind of stemmed from J.K. Rowling. And I specifically emailed Shannon, Georgina, and Sonia and said that I wasn't here for us to like name names and to like point to authors that we deem as problematic. However, this is the one exception that I'm going to make because I feel like this was kind of the catalyst point that sort of sparked the discussion amongst so many. Oh my gosh, I see a furry creature in Shannon's lap. So my attention span is gone, but very cute.
He needs attention at all times. Sorry, guys.
Of course. And, but so I think that's sort of kind of what sparked the conversation. And I think it's still a conversation that people are having and sort of trying to find their reckoning of like, okay, and we'll dive deeper into this, but like, just because, can I separate the art from the artist? If not, like, where do I draw the line? Like, what is the breaking point for me? What is my threshold? It kind of reminds me of that TikTok sound that I can excuse racism, but I draw the line at animal cruelty. And it's like, okay, interesting, because like some people draw the line at racism. And, it's just, I think everybody has their different threshold, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but that's kind of, at least to me, like where I think we have this discussion of it being not everybody on the same page, is everybody having their own personal like biases and life experiences that affect where they consider, as Sonia said, the blatant-ism to occur. And if it's not so blatant, when is it blatant enough to you versus like to the entire community? So I do find that really interesting to be like, really what I think is like the reason that people are having this conversation is like, well, I drew the line here and you drew the line here. Like, what was the difference? But what Georgina said about it being insidious and kind of like seeping into the cracks, it sort of reminds me of like if somebody points something out, and maybe this has happened to the three of you as well, but if somebody's pointed out somebody's ism or whatever it might be that makes this author problematic to me, I then go back and read something of theirs. And when you have that seed planted and you're reading it from that possibility, I do have the tendency to then be able to find it and like pick it out of the book.
Hi, Nuda. Hi, Raina. I think you made a really good point about people's lines. And what I think is really important for everyone to have is have that one friend that will kind of challenge you and make you think a little deeper into a community that you may not be a part of. And I've seen this a lot on TikTok and on Instagram when someone chooses to still support an author, say, I don't really choose, because there was one earlier last year that everyone knows that I was really vocal about. And the people came to me like, I'm still on the fence with that. And I had to explain what community it hurts, who it hurts. As a person, like, you know, as a Latina, I had to, so like there was another author earlier or end of last year that hurt the Latina community, Latin community, Latinx community. And I have to explain like kind of your point of view, because we all need that friend to kind of open the lens of something that you've never experienced or never had to really think that deep into. Everyone's kind of had their own bubble growing up. And now with the age of the internet, it's kind of making people uncomfortable. So when we challenge it, they're like, well, they kind of like dig their heels in and like, well, I'm still going to support them. And let me just kind of explain to you why it's problematic. And some people get angry and some people go, wow, that really opened my eyes and I see your point of view. I'm no longer going to support, or I'm no longer going to vocally, like, just how their responses is really important. I think like as much as we bring up separating and everything like that, I think a lot more people are coming into a point where they're understanding other people's point of view, which is great as well. And other people are just sticking to their stuff and digging their heels in.
Doubling down. Yeah, no, you use the term uncomfortable. And I love this because I come from a background in theater, and we talk about this a lot in performance. I know Shannon and I have talked about how we're theater nerds, but there's really this whole idea of like healthy uncomfortability that I think is just so important. Like, because there's being uncomfortable where, you know, you're uncomfortable, like for X, Y, and Z reason, somebody's invading your space, like in person or virtually, whatever it might be. But then there's the healthy uncomfortability factor, which I think is so important for us to be able to like analyze. Why is this making me uncomfortable? Is this making me feel uncomfortable because it's coming from like a scary predatory, you know, thing? Okay, no. So then what's the other reason? Like, let's break this down. Like, why is this making me uncomfortable? And I think that's how we do see beyond certain biases that we've just sort of grown up with, you know, with whatever upbringing we've had and like whatever exposure we've had to certain things. So I encourage people to be uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, examine why.
I think for me, because I'm from Texas, and down here in Texas, it's the Catholic Church and it's like the Protestants, and you don't really get any Muslim or Jewish like influences. And I only had like one Jewish teacher growing up, and I learned the bare minimum from her. But me as an adult having a really diverse feed on all of my social medias, talking to diverse authors and readers, I got to know a lot of Jewish, you know, authors and readers, and they've taught me so many of the stereotypes that I've grown up with not really thinking about. And then it's, like the pointed nose, or the way that, you know, the money thing, the money thing, right?
Always about the money.
Think about, yeah, I didn't even really think about that. It didn't, just flew right over my head. And then I was like, oh, that's problematic. And then I began to see it in other places. And that really has changed the way that I interrogate media as a person. So I think it's important that you actively, you know, have people who are diverse around you from diverse backgrounds and religions. but also to read diversely, because a Jewish author is going to tell you all of that, either within context or just through the narrative. So, I mean, it's why you have to sort of have a diverse everything. I don't know how to explain it other than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's great.
I think it's really important to also, when you are being, uncomfortable, and it's the frame of it, understanding that you can admit that, wow, I was wrong. And that being okay, because it's so hard for me to admit that I'm wrong. Let me tell you.
I'm with you.
And I can understand that in other people, but the power that you give yourself for grace when you say, wow, I was wrong, I thought wrong, and to admit that, and some people may not forgive you, but a lot will. And because when have we not been wrong? And I learned that a lot within myself. In my 20s, sometimes I want to go back and hit her. My 30s, totally different person. And I was wrong, and I can admit that, but it took a lot for me too. And I can see that in other people. And when people have made reviews or made glowing reviews on like a book, and now that it's been brought up that there was parts of it, now that it's been like examined and there's problematic, can you say, okay, yeah, I'm taking back that review, now looking at it a different lens? You could totally do that.
I agree. Shannon, you look like you had something to add to that.
Well, okay, I just want to give a quick shout out to H.D. Carlton, because I don't know if y'all saw this, but earlier this year, or I guess last year, someone brought up that one of her books had anti-Semitic themes in it. And her response, I have seen a lot of white women tears on TikTok when it comes to people bringing up problematic content in their books. And her response was spectacular, because she openly came out and said, hey, I was wrong. This is something that I was unaware of, and I am now educating myself as to like what I did wrong. I've been talking with the people who brought this to my attention to figure out what the steps are that like I can take and like do better. And then she fixed it. And like you said, Sonia, not everyone is going to accept her apology. Not everyone is going to agree with her or continue to support her.
Yeah.
But like, to me, that response and just that immediate, she didn't wait days, she waited hours to like really have the conversation with the creators that brought it to her attention, and then was immediately taking action. And I think that that is the, like you were saying, most important part, is just being able to say like, I fucked up and I'm going to do better. And I'm like taking back what I say, or I'm going to take down the content that supported this author or this book, because I recognize that that is now not something that I want to support. It doesn't align with my values. It doesn't align with who I am as a person. So anyway, when you were talking, I was like, oh my God.
No, and I'm seeing so many fantastic comments, by the way, from folks that I definitely want to get back to. But I think while we're on the subject of when authors are called out, I'm going to say authors, I do mean artists, because I do think this goes beyond the world of books. However, for the context of this discussion, I'm going to stick with authors. When authors are, instead of called out, called in for their behavior or something they've put into their books, or something that they've said that has offended, let's say, whether it's one person or a community, when they are made aware of that, I do want to talk about just sort of like the general response from authors and like the goods and the bads to it. So what are some of the things that, when an author is called in for whatever it is that they've done to, offend some readers, what are some of the worst things that they have done that you've seen, or that they could do that kind of just don't help their case, let's say?
So
I would say,
go ahead. There's like a lag on my end.
Okay, so recently, an author was called out for, I think it was anti-Blackness, and she really, did an apology, but the apology was not owning up to anything that she has done, right? None of the harm that she has done. And to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and continue to profit off of anti-Blackness, but I'm going to use sensitivity readers. Like, that was something. Like, that to me, it comes to when you're doing harm to a community, first thing you do is own up to it. Own up to the harm. Do not justify. Do not try to excuse it. Just own up to it. That's the first big step you have to do. And then you atone. You say you're sorry and you atone for what you have done. And the many people in the entertainment industry as a whole, but also in the book community, who do not know the basics of apologizing is alarming.
Well,
It
and I
is
think
straight up alarming.
I think it ties into, and Sonia, I know you have more to add, so I'll kick it back to you, but I think it ties into sort of what you were talking about, Sonia, of like being able to admit that you're wrong, because I think that that is a major component to this, is when the apology does come, if the apology does come, that it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily an apology on behalf of their behavior, but more of an apology on behalf of how you feel because of their behavior. Like, I'm so sorry that my words made you feel this way. I'm so sorry that you felt hurt by something that I wrote, as opposed to, I'm sorry for writing this or having this opinion or having this, flawed idea of something to begin with.
Yeah. And just to point up with that, how to apologize, I actually learned this in therapy, and you should never say but after you say sorry.
There it is.
And this is what I've seen a lot of authors do. And it's almost you want to say sorry, but you're also excusing, you want to give yourself an excuse. This goes back to the uncomfortableness of apologizing. If you say, I'm so sorry that I've hurt this community, I did not know, but nobody ever told me, nobody, I was undereducated, I was, XYZ. Just stop at I'm sorry, and then stop at the but. Don't say but.
I was always taught that like the proper form of an apology is describe what it is that you did, describe why it is that it impacted or harmed someone, and then you say what you are going to do better to improve upon the situation. End of conversation.
And if you're confused, ask for clarity.
Yeah.
If authors are genuinely confused, like, what, I am still so confused, because there's outrage. There could be outrage, rightfully so. And people are making like, I'm not reading this person because they said this. It's a great open discussion saying like, I'm so sorry that I hurt you. What about what I said was hurtful? Can someone educate me? And I love H.G. Carlton said this, like, there's so much that could be, I want to say drama very lightly, like drama that could be avoided. That if you were just open to a conversation with the community or people who are willing to communicate with you, like not like aggressively, that that can be learned from. And I just feel like drama just kind of like festers and like grows on just the ignorance of just say sorry, understand what you did was wrong. And truly there is a small part of people, or maybe a big part of people that just don't think that they're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think there would be a lot less issues in our world today as a whole if people were willing to admit when they're wrong, because it is one of my flawed pieces of me that I am just addicted to watching live debates on TikTok, and I know that it's not good for my personal well-being. However, I will say I find them so fascinating as like a character study, because you get so many people in there who are presented with the facts, who are presented with how something is harmful or hurtful to a specific community. A lot of the communities that we're also talking about when it comes to separating the art from the artist. And yet it still won't click. It still won't click. And I really do think a lot of it is confirmation bias. I think a lot of it is just not wanting to admit that you made a mistake. And I know it's hard. Like, I know it is hard to admit when you're wrong. Like, I'm so like that. I get it, but it's better not only for the community itself, but it's better for you in the long run to admit when you have made a mistake, rectify that mistake, and then make a plan for how to move forward. And like Raina said in her comment, we live in a world where information is a quick search away. You don't have to look far to find out why your words, your actions have like affected people in a specific way.
We're almost challenging like, what's the average age of the like TikToker? Let's just say 20. You're living 20 years of one thought process, and someone's coming along and challenging it. While it is a Google away, that person had to have thought to Google it. And now that you are, presented this information, now you can Google it. What are you going to do with that information? Are you going to double down, or are you going to, rebuild your own thought process? Because as an adult, I'm sorry, a lot of people are sheltered into one thought process. And, I've grown so much from 18 to 31 than I did before that. Like it's the big world out there. And that's why I give a lot of people grace at first.
Yeah.
And then me.
No, I think that's totally fair.
It's the double down that always gets me. It's the double down that always gets me. I'm like, look, I am not a perfect person. I mess up all the time. I've had to delete some tweets. I've had to delete a TikTok or two. Everyone has those days, right? But when you are doubling down, then I'm done. Then I'm like, oh no, it's all in for me, because I'm gonna drag you as far as I can drag you, because you refuse to take the L and do better. And it always irritates me.
I do have a follow-up to this, but I kind of want to ask, since you mentioned, Georgina, that like, you've deleted a tweet or two. I'm kind of curious, amongst all of us, what are some of the ways that like we've kind of held ourselves accountable as it relates to maybe some of the books we've read or the authors we followed or even promoted, and then after finding out that maybe there's an issue there, what are some of the things that like we've done to rectify the situation?
Like rectify what we did ourselves, like to either promote or of something we said?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going for.
Okay. So I will archive a video first, investigate, see what everyone's saying. If I don't like, because I'm very like, what's going on? I don't know. You're seeing a bunch of videos, people are upset. I don't really know. You're trying to collect yourselves. If I feel comfortable, will I reach out to an author? Absolutely, I will. And I will go and I will slide very respectfully and ask them like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. I just really want to know where you stand, because I'm a very proud supporter of, and like I shout from the mountaintops when I am a supporter of you. I will not shut up. So because I'm so loud, and now when I be quiet, people are gonna be like, what's wrong with Sonia? Why are these videos down? Like, I need to be able to answer for myself to the people that my friends that are like, hey, I take book recs from you. All of a sudden now you told me to read this person. Now you don't want, like, I want to be able to explain without hearsay. I want to be able to explain without, maybe she did this, maybe she didn't do this. I want to be able to like know what I'm saying. And for myself, I've caught myself saying things that I'm like, I wish I never said that. I will delete it. And I will say I own up to it. It was like I deleted a tweet not even like 2 weeks ago. I realized that it was distasteful and I deleted it. And it was within 5 minutes. I read it. I'm like, why did I do that? I'm going to delete it. And it took a lot for me to own up to it, but I need to own up to it. It makes me grow and makes other people grow and makes my friends know that I'm a person that can be approachable as well.
You're human. I love it. I know for me to date, I have deleted, I think, 2 Instagram live interviews that I've done with authors who at the time of interviewing them, we had a lovely discussion about whatever book they were promoting. And then in recent months, things have come to light about like additional work that they've created that after doing my own investigation and kind of coming to my own conclusion, because I do think it's important to, like what Sonia said, that you're also doing your own research into the events. You're not taking things at face value for what, just what one person is saying. It is important to form your own opinions and also be able to like see where people are coming from, recognize what they're talking about, and also make an informed opinion about it. So I have deleted 2 Instagram interviews with authors, and I think I've erased 1 podcast episode in my like 6 seasons of podcasting. And For me, I actually find being transparent about it important. I'm not saying everybody has to announce every time they make a choice, but I do find for myself, it's almost like telling myself and like reaffirming why I made the choices that I made, to tell people like, oh, you know what? I did delete an interview with this person. This is the reason why. If you want to read more about the situation, like this person has a great TikTok video about it. There's an article here. So I know that works for me, but I think that also kind of ties into what I think might even be a future Tit Talk topic. And that is the fact that we've kind of developed these parasocial relationships between authors and readers at this point because of social media and having such instant access to each other, that it's hard to find that line to draw of like, are authors and readers too close today? Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer for it, but I do think that that is something that I might want to discuss for a future topic. And I think it plays in well with separating the art from the artist.
Yeah, I would agree. And there was one of my favorite authors. She's from Australia. And I've read like probably 90% of her whole like backlog. But she released something recently that used the term Jezebel. And in the US, that is a racist term that has like historically been used against Black women. And so I messaged her and she was like, I had no idea because I'm from Australia. And like I felt comfortable doing that because like she was someone that I had messaged back and forth with before when I said, oh my God, I just read your book and I loved it so much. And so it's like I already kind of had a dialogue as like a reader with her. And so I think there are those situations where it's like you want to bring it to someone's attention, and she since changed it because you just like, if you love and support an author, you're hoping for the best when you approach them. But then like personally with my own content, there's been certain times where like I've debated like, do I take this down or not? And I don't my memory is terrible, so like I'm not sure if I've ever taken down a video, but like there are times where I'll make clarifications of like whatever it was that I said, or I'll come back and I'll try to duet another creator who has like said something more eloquently than I did, or that's from the community and like can actually speak to something more like personally than I'm able to. And I think that that kind of like uplifting of voices is really important when it comes to how do you navigate controversy, or how do you approach a situation when it comes to people yelling like you can't separate the art from the artist, or you can, or whatever it is, because it's ultimately about the voices that are being harmed, that are being suppressed, that are being marginalized. And so like if you can put those to the forefront, that's
Right.
kind of the best solution that I think there is. And then having those background conversations with the author, the creator, whomever, to say like, hey, didn't know if you know this, but like, and I've been called out by friends or called in by friends as well, where they're like, hey, Shannon, did you know? And I'm like, I had no idea. And then we go about it, we fix it.
Yeah.
So
That's really interesting. Well, and actually, Georgina and Shannon, I'd love to pose this to you specifically. As we've talked about, filling your feed with diverse representation and following, people of different communities and the different books that they're talking about. We've talked about diversifying what you're reading and the authors you're reading. But I'm thinking specifically from the author point of view, how does this play into your beta readers and your critique partners? Like, how do you kind of like cultivate this healthy group of diverse individuals to maybe read your book before it's published, before it goes out there, and potentially negate all these issues that might happen after the fact, like after it, because I think that is something that comes up repeatedly when we talk about like calling in authors for their problematic language and behavior. Is a lot of times we tie it to the fact that maybe they didn't run this book through beta readers that they should have.
Georgina, do you want to tackle this? Because I'm a newer author, and so I have thoughts, but like
only got 2 books out, so like, and I did that like in 2021, so I'm not that old. But let's see. I think that because I'm writing right now, and this is not a self promo, it's just an example. I'm writing Korean man, right, as one of my main characters, and what I was really concerned, I had this talk with like Asian friends of mine, like, is this person too stereotypical? Am I integrating their culture correctly? Because there's a correct way to do it, especially, and it depends on each culture and their rules and their norms. And you have to have people, a diverse group of, like, I did a TikTok about this yesterday, like having friends around you, author friends around you that will say, no, stop it. No, stop. People around that will call you out on your bullshit, because being authors, you sort of, especially when you have a lot of readers, and I'm relatively new, but even having, you sort of kind of get an ego, and you start like feeling yourself, and that can be dangerous. That can be, especially if you're writing diverse content, it can be so dangerous. So you have to have people around you who will nip that crap in the bud quickly. And you have to be able to have like an open mind about it, to be like, okay, I will change it. Right. So like, I think like when I say with authors, I say get diverse. I say diverse a lot, but it's really like a big part of this journey is you have to have a diverse group of friends, because when we're doing, as people, we tend to go to a bubble, especially, I hate to say it, white people tend to hang around other white people, and it's very hard to sort of break in within those circles, and it's very hard to get information into those circles because they tend to congregate. So be really intentional about the authors that you're friends with. Make sure you have people around you who are diverse and who are able and willing to call you out on it.
Well, and I think the other part of it is like, you want to build a community around you that is willing to be honest with you. And so, like, making friends who are diverse, that's great. But, like, making friends who are willing to call you in when you're like creating art is even more important. So, like, when I first started writing my first book, I was very intentional, and I have the privilege of having a large enough platform to where I had made friends that do come from like diverse communities. So one of my characters is a trans man, and I was very intentional, and I'd reached out to a mutual of mine that like I had some conversation with, and I was like, hey, you don't have to do this, but like, would you want to sensitivity read this book and like give me your feedback as a trans man? And they were like, absolutely, I'm so excited. They message me every time I write a new chapter, and they're like, when can I read more? And like, that was a really lovely kind of friendship that I now have, and he's now one of my really good friends. But like, I recently wrote a scene that dealt with a little bit of like medical discrimination in terms of being a trans character, and I sent it to him, and I was like, I don't want to fuck this up. And he messaged me back, and he's like, this is how you can adjust this. I think you did this really well, but this is kind of the trouble spot that a lot of people are going to go into. And then the other half of it is like, he was really wonderful in that, like, I asked him before I knew what a sensitivity reader really was. And so I didn't realize that you should be paying your sensitivity readers at the time. And so when it came to other characters in my book, I have a Black man and an Asian person in the like love interests. And so I like reached out to a sensitivity reader, and I asked them if they would read it and give me their cultural feedback, their like personal history feedback. And they gave me like a 10-page report that was like, here's what you did well, here's what you can improve upon, here's the legitimately problematic areas that you have fucked up with. And then they also gave me like a bunch of resources of like, here's where you can like expand your own learning and your own reading and like just literacy around what it is that you're creating here. And I think that like, best money I've ever spent. Better than an editor, better than a book cover designer, because like it gave me the confidence to be able to say like, I am at least doing the best that I can with where I'm at right now. I'm not perfect, but this is better than where I was. And now writing the second book, like the second half of my duet, I have so much more information going into it and being able to say like, okay, well, we're just going to not try and navigate that because that's not my story to tell as a white woman, or we're not going to do this specific thing because again, that's not my story to tell as a white woman. And so like I think it's a combination of like finding people who love you and adore you and are willing to kindly come to you and say, here's the feedback and here's the honest feedback that I have. And then you also want the kind of like separation from someone that you're going to hire to do that same work, or you're paying for the expertise that they have that says, I know so much more than you do.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so many different options that you can go for, but I think like Georgina was saying, it's the community, I think that it comes down to, and that diverse community that you surround yourself with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for myself, and having just released my first novella this past fall, that was really important to me to include beta readers and sensitivity readers that represented every single one of the characters that I had in the book, to be able to like share their feedback and how to make sure everything's respectful. And what I found really interesting, and I did end up changing one thing, was because I heard it from a reader, was I did make a Harry Potter reference that was very minor. And this isn't even coming from like a diehard Harry Potter stan like some of my friends have been, but it was in relation to describing what a character looked like and just saying he was like a combination of Ron Weasley and Harry Potter. And it was as simple as that. But I knew when I wrote that, there was still something just about writing it that like icked for me. Like I just didn't like it. And the only reason I didn't change it when I first wrote it was I couldn't think of a different way to describe the character. And it was one of the things I included on like the one sheet that I sent out to sensitivity and beta readers was, I have like a list of a couple things I want to check with y'all and see how they hit for you. And this is one of them, because the other one for me is the word predatory, which I have like a major issue reading in romance. And I know it's not going to be the same for everybody, but anytime they describe somebody's gaze as predatory, I don't know, it hits me in a very negative way. And I was really surprised, in case in point, to show that it doesn't affect everyone the same way. I had 9 out of 10 readers say that the Harry Potter reference didn't bother them at all. And I had one person, a LGBTQ person, say that if I was going to include that, I needed a trigger warning, because that at this point has gotten to be a reference that is triggering and harmful to a specific community. And that is a community that I do not want to like attack for the means of having a description. And it's as easy as changing it and asking, well, do you have an alternative? Like, let's brainstorm a few ideas and come up with something. Because if I have the 9 straight people telling me that it's not affecting them, but I have the one person from the queer community, the ones who have been targeted by the words and actions of J.K. Rowling, and I'm making a J.K. Rowling reference, absolutely not. So I think it also is like a matter of, and we've touched on this as well, is like listening to the people from the communities that are being affected by the actions and words of whoever the artist is, as opposed to the people who are not a part of those communities pointing out that they're fine with them because it doesn't affect them. That's it. I'm done.
Just mic drop and we're finished.
Done. No. But anyway, I wasn't sure if anybody had anything else to add, but that was both Shannon and Georgina, you answered the question. And Sonia, you've just been sitting there patiently listening to everyone. So I appreciate you. But no, I think as we kind of boil it down to, I mean, really, let's answer the question. Do you separate the art from the artist? I mean, I think generally the consensus is no. I do want to ask though, is there ever an exception? Is there ever an exception for you in which you would separate the art from the artist?
I have to think about that for a little bit.
Okay.
Because, I mean, I could say no, but then I'd, in 10 minutes from now, be like, wait, I want to take it back. Let me think.
Okay, I'm going to say no, and I'll give an example. And it's from the art world. Have y'all heard of like the Banksy auction where there was a piece of art that was beautifully framed by Banksy, who's an artist that no one knows the identity of? The second that the gavel hit, they had installed a like paper shredder at the bottom of that piece of art. And the second that the like auction was closed for that piece of art, someone paid a ridiculous amount of money for it. The shredder turned on and half of the piece of art went through it and the piece of art was destroyed. And I think that something like that is a really good example of why you can't separate the art from the artist, because the process of creating something ends whenever the artist says that it's finished, and it ends the second that you present it to the world. However, it still belongs to that artist fundamentally, no matter who purchases it, no matter like who it gets like transmitted to or whatever.
Your name is on it.
Your name is on it. And I think in that example, Banksy made a statement and he says, I still own this and I still have control over what this piece of art is. And it's different now because I made that choice. And so like when you're talking about separating the art from the artist, every time that someone participates in your work, be it viewing it, reading it, like, I don't know, making arts and crafts out of your pages, like they are making their own personal statement about your work and what it means to them. But every second that you let your art exist in the world, it's going to be interpreted differently. And the artist needs to be able to stand by that. And if you can't, take it down.
Nice. Yeah. That's interesting. Oh, Banksy, you could teach a whole class just on Banksy, like, let's be honest, but it's so interesting. Well, and then because we've talked about sort of like what alienates us from the artist is in their response usually to whatever harm that they've created. So I'm wondering, when it comes to the few and far between artists who do make the apologies, who do take steps to learn and who take steps to then move forward and do better, is that something that you can then, I don't want to say forgive and forget, because I don't think that's what it is, but maybe it's to forgive but not forget.
I mean, you can forgive and they think that you forget. And then they do it all over again in a different way. That's another thing is that and Shannon, thank you so much for bringing that example up, because you really like kind of changed my thought process there on it. I'm not going to lie. I was like over here like, no. Wow. That's absolutely correct. Honestly, then I'm going to say that you can't really separate the art from the artist. You just never know how it's going to be interpreted. And or who's going to have a screenshot of something you've said before and now 10 years later use it against you, or use it to call you in.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we seen a tweet from some Hollywood actor from 15 years ago somehow resurface on the internet and spark a whole new conversation to see how they still feel the same way today?
And they could have been a different artist then. Yes. I was a different, you could have been a different person. Say that.
That's actually, I think that's really important, is not, and this is by no means me saying that you can separate the artist from the art. However, I do think artists change and artists grow, and that the artist today might not have been the same artist 20 years ago. 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, we live in a world that is constantly changing, and we are constantly talking about and pointing to the changes. And of course, they're going to affect you, and they're going to affect what you're creating. So I do think there are things, and my friend Andrea, who hosts Shelf Love podcast, she's talked about this on her show before, the idea of like joyful problematization, that like there are some things that it's really interesting. I highly recommend listening, but this whole idea of like, there are things that like we can look back on like our fond memories with them, and even maybe not look back on, like look at something like The Bachelor that's on TV today and recognize the problems with it, and being able to recognize the problems with it, but then still finding the joy in watching it or reading it, and the way that it affects you personally, versus the way that it like affects the world. And so I do think there's room for growth, there's room for potential, but I think the problem is we've seen time and time again that not be the follow through, that we've seen time and time again, the repeat offense. And I think until we see a constant change and constant growth, and that becomes the norm, and that the repeat offending becomes the outlier, that we won't necessarily be able to separate the two, if that makes sense. And it's not just a bunch of word jumble coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, and I think we have a few questions in the chat too.
Oh, great. Let's see. B said, what do we do when accountability is only imposed on marginalized groups such as women of color? Look at the Lizzo and Beyonce lyrics this past year. Ooh, yeah, that was actually, the Lizzo one was also a good example. I'll leave that up.
I am the white woman in the room, so I'm just going to stay quiet.
Okay, we're talking about Black women, and I'm a Black female presenting person. I think I try to give it with grace, and I try to give them a little time, right? Because how they respond to it is the biggest, the biggest thing that I can, I can't even talk today. How they respond to it is the way that I know if I'm going to continue to support them or not, right?
Yeah.
It's their response. So with Lizzo did it with much grace and with much and did it with much love and respect as she possibly could. Now, Beehive, do not come for me. Do not come for me, Beehive. But Beyonce, she tends to like skid around. She tends to like be a little dirty about it. Then Lizzo and her failures, because Lizzo will live up to everything that she has done badly, but Beyonce will quietly like do something or change something and never talk about it. And I think when you mess up, part of the biggest thing is that you have to own up to it, and you have to own up to it as loudly as you messed up. And that is like the difference. But when it comes to women of color, it comes to marginalized people, I tend to give them a lot more grace than when it's just white people or white women. And that's just the way it is.
That's fair.
I think accountability shouldn't just be on women of color. I think accountability should be go to everywhere. So when I see that only a certain person is getting called out for things that I've seen a lot other people do, I will say something. I encourage others to say something, because I don't like when people sit and wait for a person they do not like or agree with or don't identify as how they identify, and then attack when they do something wrong. Like, oh, they did it now. And this is the framework of everything that they've ever held against them.
Yeah.
I can't with that. And I will immediately call out a person and be like, it's funny that you think Lizzo is this when I've seen the same problematic behavior with XYZ. What is the true issue here? Is it Lizzo, or is it what she did that offended you? And it can very much be both, but where is it heavier lying at? And I like to I like to call that out a lot because I want somebody to call me out when I've even like Bees is a great friend of mine and I will say something and be like, this person bothered me. And she's like, but this other person said the same thing and it never bothered you. She's like very good at like keeping me very accountable. And it just goes to show like how it made me grow as a person.
We need those people.
Well, and so one of the things that you made me think of, Sonia, is that the response to like Lizzo and Beyonce and the harm that they caused to the various communities that they impacted, if you contrast that with like the Swifties' response to Taylor Swift's most recent like video that went wrong and had fat phobia in it,
Yeah.
I think there is a really tough conversation that white people need to have with themselves when talking about white creators, because ultimately it comes back to the fact that white supremacy prioritizes the comfort of white people over everything else. And so like if you're not able to like wrestle with that feeling that says, why am I being harder on the person of color or the marginalized person? It's most likely because of your whiteness and because of the privilege that you have existing in a space as a white person. And so I think calling out, especially anyone who has privilege in whatever form it takes, be that whiteness, maleness, whatever, like that's hard for people. And it's a learned thing and it's a learned process, but like it is so important. And so having friends, like you mentioned, Sonia, who are willing to like wrestle with you so that you can work through that, that's awesome. And we all need that. But it's also, are you doing the work yourself? Are you holding yourself accountable just as much as the artist?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's very well put. It reminds me, I did an interview last year with Kwana Jackson about her book. I think it was called How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days. But what I found really interesting was, it started as a breezy interview talking about her book. And I didn't want to bring it up, but it kind of came up naturally. The fact that on Goodreads, her book had been marked at like an average, like 1 or 2 star read. And this was like a big release. It had like a Publisher's Weekly star. I mean, like this was like heavily promoted, and she brought it up. I didn't, and I did kind of talk to her about, I'm really honestly confused because like I adored your book. I thought, and obviously we all, like books differently, but what I loved about the book was it features a woman, a Black woman who I want to say is also a fat Black woman who is over the age of 35, driving across the country to pursue Keanu Reeves, or the idea of Keanu Reeves, before he gets married. And we talked about, is this something that people have an issue with because she's an older woman? Is this a thing people have an issue with because she's a Black woman, because she's an older Black woman? Would you see the same response to a character doing the same things but being a white woman, or a white woman of 23 as opposed to 35? And I mean, it's something that I think we can recognize not only in the people we're talking about and the authors we're talking about and bloggers, but also in the books themselves and how people respond to the characters within the books that we're reading. And yeah, it boggles my mind, and it's something that I still think about and still wonder about every time I read a book, and have to also question myself, like, why am I having an issue with something that's happening in here? And 90 some odd % of the time, I think it all ties back to thinking about my own whiteness, my own heteronormativity, my own thinking about the patriarchy that we live in. Like, it's just a lot of things that have been instilled in me that you have to be able and be willing to dismantle in order to have these conversations and recognize why you're reading things a certain way and why you're treating people, be them fictional or not, in a certain light. So thank you for that question, Bees. That was wonderful.
Yeah, and I think Nuda had a good follow-up question.
Yes, I know. This chat has been going wild. Y'all are doing fantastic. I'm trying to go back and find which one it was.
Oh, how can a person be given a chance if
was it this
is
one?
that it?
this is what I found. How would you know if that person actually changed, learned from a previous mistake? If not given a chance, almost everyone gets canceled immediately. I will challenge that in just a second, because I think the term cancel culture is
Doesn't
completely,
exist.
yeah, I don't think it applies in any case. I think it's a term that we've sort of misheard and misquoted and like have this false idea of what it is. But almost everyone gets canceled immediately when something surfaces from their past. So if anybody wants to dive into that.
I think maybe if, just to maybe use another word for cancel, maybe deplatformed, where no longer their voice is no longer heard by the masses, or be willing to be heard by the masses, because they no longer want to accept that apology, or if they even gave an apology. That's what I'm saying. That people are, I mean, I've seen recently that without question, some people take whatever evidence they have and deplatform them in their own mind, and like they will block them, or they won't follow this creator anymore and go on from there. I think maybe that's where Nuda is, but I don't want to speak for her. But how you would know if a person actually changed and learned from their past mistakes, admitting that they're gonna be making the steps, and then staying and seeing if they're holding them accountable to making those steps of change. Saying like, HD Carlton, you brought up, like, did she go back and change it? Was it enough just to apologize and then the book just kind of stood there on KU or available without purchase, and no changes were made? Or did she just say like, I know I did something wrong, and then moved on? Like, I think it's important for me to see change actions with your words.
Yeah, I agree.
It's always been like that. After you've unpacked everything, what are you going to do with the information that your community has given you, your readers have given you, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, anyone has given you? What are you going to do with that information? Are you going to act? Are you going to, or are you going to, double down? Like, whatever it is, because I feel like the masses would back off if you say, I'm changing, I'm doing this. It's not going to happen tomorrow. And some people want it to happen immediately. It's not going to happen. But a month from now, 2 months from now, a year from now, if you see her writing changing, if you see their writing changing, his writing change, their actions changing, what they're sharing on their social media changing, their view, in my mind, their views are changing, they're growing as people, and I'm like, okay, I can live with this. But they could, have another bump in the road too, just because you've been like, smacked in the hand once, and you're like, I've learned from everything, I'm okay, like, and you maybe make a little mistake again, or another one again, not the same way. Just continuously grow, because I think after you've been like, not scolded, but like called in, and you're afraid to make that mistake again. So some people kind of really over correct, like, I'm never gonna write again. I've seen this, like, well, I guess I'm gonna stay off social media for a while. I've seen that. It's like, okay, so you're taking the opposite approach. Instead of doubling down, you're kind of like digging your heels in, like, that you're still not wrong, and you don't want to be held accountable, and those aren't the actions of holding yourself accountable. I'm kind of babbling, but that's kind of how I feel about
No.
that.
Well, and I think it's interesting that as you were mentioning that, Bees made this comment that imagine doing better and apologizing and then saying you got bullied into making that change. Like, I think that's another version of like overcorrecting as well, to be like, oh, do you see the changes that I've made? I did this for you. I did this because people told me I had to, and you should want to make those changes. I think as authors, you recognize that, or you should recognize that your book is never going to be for everyone. We know that. I'll say every good author has that idea, that they know their book is not for everyone. However, I think you should also try to make your book as accessible and as available to as many people as possible, because you want people to read your book. You want to sell your books. You want people to enjoy them and see a piece of themselves in it, in one way or the other. And so why wouldn't you want to make those corrections, if not for yourself, but for the ability to be able to sell your books?
So Nora said something in the comments. I agree with Sonia, but people don't give you this chance, especially if you're in the public eye. People never forget, but are we the same people that we are 10 years ago? And I think like something like that, where you're talking about public opinion and public perception of an author and their work, or an artist and their work, comes down to who's sitting with their discomfort and who is avoiding it. Because if you are talking about a person who 10 years ago published something that in today's climate people are more willing to speak out about, if that author sits there and says, I'm willing to do the work and sit with the fact that like I am uncomfortable with either my own content or the content that like, or the feedback that I'm receiving, whatever it is, that speaks really loudly. But it's the people like Sonia mentioned where it's like, okay, well, I'm never going to write again. Or the people who are like, I'm going to take a break from social media. They're not sitting with that discomfort. That's not change. That is like, that is a retreat and like a willingness to, or an unwillingness to wrestle with the most difficult parts of being a public persona. And that is negative feedback. Like saying that I'm just going to take a step back from social media is essentially saying, well, I'm just going to wait until the internet forgets about this, versus saying I'm going to be accountable for this. I'm going to make steps to change. Like that is something that you can document and that people can follow that journey along with you. And especially in today's social media like TikTok, where like there are these parasocial relationships between authors and readers, the people who love and adore you are always going to love and adore you. The people who are on the fence are going to watch you very carefully as you put your own journey and your own work on the internet. And the people who hate you are always going to hate you. But it's the willingness to sit with discomfort and the unknown that makes everything, like all the difference.
You aren't the same person you were 10 years ago. And but like this brings to the point where I said earlier in the discussion where you can say that you weren't the same person 10 years ago, but people are going to say, well, you said that anyways. You said it anyways. And there's nothing you can do about those people. There's nothing you can do with the people who have it dead set to hate you.
And that's their own issue that they need to reckon with. But also, I think if you aren't, and I don't think any of us are the same person we were 10 years ago. I think there's things about us that are the same. But I think you're expected to grow. And if you look back, you have 10 more years of experience now in life, in everything, to be able to look back on who you were 10 years ago and make that judgment of yourself as well, to see like, oh my gosh, you're right. That's something that I never would say today. But 10 years ago, I wasn't the person I am today. I didn't have the knowledge that I have today. I didn't have the friend group that I had today. I didn't have my education that I have today. And I think you should be able to, 10 years into the future, be able to see the faults as well as the positives of who you were in the past and how you've grown since then. So if anybody's expecting you to be the same person your entire life, that's a them problem. That's not a you problem.
And that goes hand in hand with you. Go ahead.
Oh no. For me, I think when we're coming to these, especially the authors, because book talk runs so very quickly. It's just, right? So for me, it's always like, look, there's a point of no return for forgiveness. Like, I can understand a mistake. I can understand you being ill-informed. I can understand that something didn't quite like penetrate the bubble quite right? I get that. But it's the way in which you are not taking accountability, or you're using white women tears, because I'm seeing this, because Romance Lundy is 99.9% white women. Let's be honest. Using white women tears instead of just, owning up to it. And also the way in which the bigotry is written. Like, oh, I wish I could point out a particular book that's been, who I'm, if I want to talk about it so badly.
I feel like I know which one you're leaning towards, but also like with the rate that book talk goes at, it could be like 1 of 20.
Can I talk about it? Because I have to say it. It's Piper C. Day. Piper C. Day. Now
it was either going to be her or it was going to be Pawn and the Puppet.
Yep.
Yeah.
I even had another third. I had a third
I didn't
one
know
in mind.
I didn't know anything about this book, but I had someone, I can't remember their names, had someone break down what was in the book, and it was abhorrent. I mean, I don't know if you know the book Save the Pearls, but it's on that same level of anti-blackness. Like being black, having melanin is a sin. Like it's a disease. It's something bad. And I'm like, and that from when you have that, that's something that you can't apologize for me. And that's beyond it's just beyond, like, that's and I think that there are mess ups that you can mess up and you can come back from, but there's also a crossroads that once you cross it, that's a no forever.
Yeah.
And Piper CJ, like, she was always problematic, but to have someone, a white woman no less, as a white person no less, tell me exactly the type of racism that was in her books, I was like, absolutely not. I will never buy anything from that woman. Anything.
Yeah.
Because that's a point of no return.
This kind of goes back to like where we started the conversation. We all have our threshold. Like I know from the DMs and response that Sonia got from her poll that she put up that, some people kind of draw the line at it being blatant, but then what does that constitute? What is blatant for one person might not be blatant for the other person. I will say in my own personal experience of, I think it is tough when it is an author that's being called in for problematic issues, whether it's in their book or their behavior. And it's an author that you love their books. Like I do find that difficult. I will say it's only happened to me twice at this point, from all the people that we've seen called out, that it's been two people that I really loved. And I think it adds this extra level of like, oh my gosh, not only do I have to like reckon with whatever's going on here, but I also have to recognize that this person that I've personally developed this like bond with has done harm, maybe not to me, but to other people. And that's tough. But I will say in my experience, I've also recognized that when there is harmful behavior happening on the page and in person, it usually is escalating with each publication and each message. And maybe it's the behavior and the words, and maybe it's just you being able to recognize it better and see it more clearly with everything they say and do. But in my personal experience, I've yet to see people really say that they're going to take the steps to do better and actually do better the next go around to make up for the fact. Like I have yet to see it. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, but in my personal experience with the authors that I have seen and had issues with, it's just gotten worse with each time that they do publish a new book.
Yes. And sometimes it's not even the authors what they write in their books, it's what they do on their social media. And
Yep.
I had a very public one with one author. And I'm gonna call out, look, me and Willow Winters will never see eye to eye with this. I'm sorry. But also, when you say things that are harmful, apologize, then take down your apology, double down on the harmful content, and then months later try to release we were never going to remember what you did. Like, I came out like, did you really think that we would forget? Let me remind everybody.
I know, bless you.
And I'm the type of person that's like, because I'm a very like, I want facts. And let me show you. I'm going to tell you screenshots. This is what she did. I don't want you to hear it from me. Let me show you what she did. I'm going to show you the screenshots of what I have. Here are the videos that she thought she would be able to delete because she said she was going to learn. Well, guess what? I kept them just in case this very moment I knew, because she deleted them and kind of doubled down. I needed to show, like, this is not how you take an apology. And then the tweets, and then the follow-up TikToks, and then the blog posts.
And the fans. And the bullying. And
oh my God, I was attacked But you know what? I have a backbone, or I have a strong skin. I can do it. But like, it was out of control. And that is just, let that just be the one thing that you do not do.
And this is why I do want to have like a future discussion kind of about what I think of as toxic author stan culture, just like bridging this gap or bridging this point of having this like reader author relationship to this really dark, dangerous place. And I mean, obviously, that's not to say that I don't enjoy friendships that I have with authors. I mean, I think of myself as friends with Shannon, and Shannon's here. But at the same time, this is the same reason why I say cancel culture isn't what we think of cancel culture to be, because, like Bea said, Willow Winter still has a career. Like, if cancel culture was cancel culture as it's been presented to us, the people that are being called out repeatedly, and if you're following, who is it on TikTok that has the running list of author offenses? Is it or like
I have one.
I know you have one. I think it's Akiva Reads.
Yes,
I might be getting that wrong.
She also has one.
I think Akiva Reads has a running list. We're up to 33 things.
I think Amvi has one as well.
Okay. Yeah. And it's wild that it's just this much of an ongoing list. That is why I think that cancel culture isn't what we perceive it to be, because if it was, this wouldn't be happening all the time with a lot of the same people and still selling books.
Well, and I think Georgina brought up a really good point earlier when we were talking about Piper CJ.
I think
it's that like author behavior for me is a little bit more subtle, and I can forgive it sometimes purely because a reaction is a reaction. You don't always think about that. And I'm okay with an author like doing something and then saying, I'm so sorry for this. I really fucked up in this situation. Here's how I'm going to do it better. And I am not going to make this offense again. So like in Piper CJ's case with the author reviewer thing, it's like, we should have learned a lesson here. We didn't. But then in terms of her content and the book that she wrote, that's like problematic at a different level, because again, that is like, it takes months or years to write a book. Granted, hers was like 6 days or something like that.
Oh.
But like, it's so different when you are willing to like write something down and like document it forever, you know?
Then if you're going to do a personal stance on things too, then do it on your personal, like separate that from who you are as an author. Like if you like, I'm going to like, and I'm going to touch on this really, really quickly. The like liking certain tweets or their spouses or somebody in their inner family liking certain tweets. And like, you're like, but that's not how I feel, or this is not how I agree with, like, I didn't think anybody would see it. It's like, then you did it on your author platform. People are going to find it.
That's attached to your author platform. An
There's
extension of you.
times when I'm just like, do you have a group chat that you can send these thoughts to without putting it on the internet? Like, I swear, do you have friends?
Yeah. Like, do you need to make an alt like Twitter account where it goes into the void
That
and no one knows?
Did you see the bad art friend thing that happened? That they did the group chats in court. Like they did the group chats in court. The bad art friend saga that happened last year. They took the authors
that one
because I actually talked to a lawyer about this because Romancelandia has nothing but lawyers, right? So I talked to a lawyer about this, and they can subpoena your group chats. So
what's said in group chats doesn't stay there.
Get a journal. Yeah, get a journal. Don't tell anyone about the journal. Write a journal and continue on about your day.
Yeah.
Tell your therapist, like, that's it.
Different outlets. It does not need to go on the internet. Like this person said, you can write out a tweet and then leave it in your draft. Write it down, then put it away. It doesn't need to, if it's just about getting this thought out on paper. But no, I think that's a great point, in that it goes beyond just writing the book, because I think that's the other thing too, is that when we do talk about how many authors are being, called in for whatever they're doing, it's sometimes what they're writing, but I feel like maybe even more than that, it's because of the way that they're presenting themselves on their various platforms, whether it's on video on TikTok, whether it's on Instagram, or what they tweet. And I think all of it ties together. It's not one part of it is the artist, one part of it is the art. It's all a brand. And I know that I feel icky even using the word brand in 2023. Like, I hate being like, that's your brand, but it is your brand. Like, and if you make the choice to have a separate pen name, if you make the choice to keep your real name as your pen name, like, it's all tied together. So whether you want it to be or not, that is a part of your brand, your image, your words, your art. Like, it is all part of you and an extension of you, which, you know, when I take that into consideration, basically just affirms the conclusion for me that you cannot separate the art from the artist.
A lot of people brought that up in the DM, like DMing me. They're like, you bring up a lot about what somebody does on quote unquote their personal time, like what they comment or what they tweet or something like that. And I have a difficult time separating. They're saying, well, just because they wrote that tweet doesn't mean that I can't enjoy their writing. Like, that's just like that's them as a person, and I'm going to still enjoy their writing. I'm like, that's completely valid and up to you, but I cannot look past that, because if you feel this way about somebody, if you feel that you are so outside of what's right socially, and just like, if you're just so wrong, I cannot read your book with the same mind saying you wrote this with that wrong brain. I can't.
Well, and it's I mean, I think we tie a lot of things today in with politics, and I know I do, and it's a conversation that I have with friends too, when it comes to like the idea of like, can you be friends with or date somebody even, or partner with somebody who aligns politically different than you? And for me, it's a firm no, because you're actively, whether you recognize it or not, voting against the interest of people that are very close to me. Sometimes it's against my own, you know, rights and interests as well. And so I can't separate something like that. And I apply that same way of thinking towards the art that I consume, and like making a conscious decision of, if there are 1,000 romance authors out there and, you know, 10 of them are talking about things that don't align with things that I believe in and, you know, advocate for, I have 90 other ones that I can go, you know, 900 ones that I can go read. And that's the other thing that drives me nuts, is this idea of like, well, we're going to cancel so many people that like there just won't be anything left to read. And again, if that's your way of thinking, that's a you problem. You are not doing your due diligence in browsing the number of options that are available to you from artists who are not hurting people.
Also, you're probably not reading diversely.
100%.
Yep. Absolutely.
And as a consumer, I feel like there's so much more my money can go to. There's an indie author that is begging for readers, that are really asking for somebody to notice their work. Why can't I? You know, money is power, and where you put it is going to give them a platform.
Mhm.
And I always view it as, I'm sorry, but my money can be spent elsewhere, to a person who better aligns with, that isn't hurting a community that I love, or I'm friends with, or I'm in. And yeah, and then there's other, like, I made a review, like, I just felt like this book was childish. Just like, an author came into my DM saying like, if you're looking for a more mature approach, here's that. And I view that the same way about problematic what is it called, authors. They're like, I agree with you, I support you, and then I'm like, you know, my money is spent better elsewhere, not with somebody who is hating a community or hating a certain, like, just spewing hate. I can't spend money on that.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna drop in real quick. I've had this discussion with authors like where we are talking about going into this business and not treating it as a business. And there's a danger of readers and authors becoming too close. But I think like for authors on the author side, authors are not seeing readers as customers at all. And so it's a weird, like either it's a high school clique, like it very feels like high school cliquish, especially on Facebook, or it's like a total like hands off, this is just distance sort of feeling towards their readers. And it's just a weird thing that's going on. And when we're talking about branding, like they don't realize that part of their branding is themselves. Like you're part of the brand. And whatever you show on your public author platforms is going to be what makes a reader read your stuff or not read your stuff. So I think a lot of authors don't know what they're doing, don't know about branding, don't know about marketing, don't know about anything. And they're coming here thinking like this is high school or like an MLM or something. And that and that's damaging them in the long term.
Yeah, I probably get, and I'm sure Sonia probably does as well, because you do reviews and talk about books, that I get people who slide into my DMs or send me an email regularly saying, "Hey, I wrote this book and I'd love for you to read it." And I do make it clear that I'm open to people reaching out to me to send me anything that they might want me to read. However, I also make it clear that I'm so much more invested in reading books from people that I have like a personal interest in as well, that they've shown themselves, not just their books, not just advertising their books, but they've advertised themselves as like, these are the things I love to do. These are the things I value. These are the things I talk about. When we talk about women's rights, when we talk about, whatever in my abortion rights, like these are the things that I stand for and stand up for. That to me is just as attractive, if not more attractive than the concept of your book. Because like we said, there are thousands, millions of books that are out there available for us to read. And so if it comes down to supporting an enemies to lovers rom-com from 50 different authors, I'm going to pick the one that is coming from an author that I am much more interested in hearing more from their specific voice and their specific takes. So I know that that's not everybody, but I think this kind of ties into being a more conscientious and making specific choices when it comes to your reading. And yes, that requires a little more critical thinking than just picking up a random book. However, I think it's better for us. And I think it's better, especially as like bloggers and reviewers who are reviewing books. I think it says a lot more about us to the people who follow our reviews as well. And that they recognize that these are steps that we're willing to take to better ourselves, our own reading habits, as well as help the rest of the people find books to read that aren't the same books being recommended by everybody else.
Yeah, I've been burned by some books that were 5 stars to other people. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
That's a tough one, but well, we've gone a little long, but that's okay. This was perfectly fine. It's such a wonderful conversation, and I really do appreciate everybody in the chat with your questions and your comments. Like it really makes for a much more fun and interesting discussion. So I do appreciate you being here and sharing that. And if you're listening to the podcast version of this, you can always go back and watch the video on YouTube. I think the comments will also show up as you're watching the video, especially the ones that I've pinned to the video as it goes on. But as we wrap things up, I just love to have everybody kind of tell everyone watching or listening where people can find and follow you and, listen to all of your fabulous takes and buy your wonderful book. So I'll just start it off the same way I did at the beginning and kick it over to Shannon.
I feel like it's just like the square because of how we appear. My pen name is Shannon Elliot. You can find me on pretty much every platform at author Shannon Elliot, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And then my books are on Amazon. Book right now, but soon to be second book is coming out in March. So
Yay!
That's me. Sonia,
Okay.
I would love to know where to follow you.
feel like the Brady Bunch up in here with these squares. I'm just like looking from one corner to the other.
So yeah, I'm Sonia, and you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, and I have a link tree on my Instagram to find other things like my book, Goodreads reviews and stuff like that. I promise you, I'm nice. And yeah, you can follow me there. I'll be happy to follow anything back.
And you can follow me everywhere, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and at Inglorious Gigi. You can find me all my books at georginakierston.com.
Wonderful. And if you're listening to the podcast, you know where you're getting it from, but it's Boobies and Newbies. I'm Kelly. We're at Boobies Podcast across all the platforms, except on TikTok. I'm at Real Kelly Ray because they won't let me use the word boobies in my handle. So we had to make some concessions, but that's okay. And tune in next month. We'll have a brand new topic, brand new panel here on YouTube, and then that audio will be translated over to podcast format. But thank you all so much for being here and for listening. And of course, thank you to my fabulous panelists. It's been a treat.
Thanks, everybody. It was so much fun.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you for everyone who came out.
Thanks so much for listening. Tune in every Friday for a brand new episode of Boobies and Newbies. And don't forget, you can always catch up on previous episodes on your favorite podcast app or on boobiesandnewbies.com. Happy reading!